So hi everyone. For those of you that I haven't had the pleasure to meet before, my name is Maria Francis Rodriguez and I am the VP of Program Operation with ATD Central Florida. I'm very excited to be today here because we are starting the Beyond Instructional Design cohort, which is a program that we have been talking. Well, the screen doesn't want to move and I don't know why. One of those technical issues, so I appreciate if you can have a little bit of understanding and patience. Let me see. No? Well, I'm gonna do it in this way then. I have the pleasure to introduce Barry. Barry Nadler has been a great collaborator with ATD Central Florida for more than 5 years. He has been participating in 2 boot camps in Orlando in 2020, if I remember correctly. And Barry is also an instructional design with more than 20 years of experience. He is currently a thought leader on a training team that provides internal system and job role training to the largest financial technology company. It's called FIS, right, Barry? And he...
FIS. It's not. They don't say it as FIS. They say it as FIS.
FIS. Thank you.
Sure.
He has been co-chairing the volunteer committee for ICE, which is our annual conference for ATD, for several years. And he has been leading also instructional design training for the chapter in several occasions. Right now, Barry has been invited as a speaker, as a guest speaker in different industry conferences. He has several articles that he has been writing and co-chairing with other professionals. And today I am really happy to have you, Barry. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your expertise and your passion for helping others to move on with our profession and to improve our skills. We have tonight 2 sessions in one. We're going to be talking about design thinking on how to be a better business advocate, but we also will have in the second period of the session, we're going to have modern learning design and myth about learning. Before we start with Barry sharing his knowledge and this important concept that is practically a challenge, maybe for the I will say instructional design professional, how to address the key performance indicator and how to amplify or get a better vision on how you can become a better instrument or a better associate in your organization. Before we do that, I need to go to some business aspect of the chapter, if you give me the time. First of all, the best thing that we can share is our association with the National ATD, the Association for Talent Development, where we get a bunch of benefits, which I encourage each one of you to look at it. There are two new benefits that are unlimited access to the talent development of work guides and the 99 micro courses that are professional plus only. But you have a broad spectrum of benefits when you associate with the national organization. That's what we call the power member, when you have not only the chapter, the individual chapter, but you also are associated with the national. We have several common events that I want to promote and invite you to engage with us. I know that several of you have been present in the face-to-face event that we had on May and in December also, but I want to invite you for, of course, the next session of Barry on the 19th. Then we have on July 26th, we have Financial Literacy 101, which is a virtual event and is with Cherry Blackney. And it's a very interesting program, actually. It's an hour of on time at 7 p.m. On August 10, we have Power Up Your Mental Fitness. That is about emotional intelligence with Anita Torres. It's called Anita the Passionita Torres. That's what the way she likes to be called. And on September 7th, we have again a live event, which is a happy hour where we are promoting the degree and practice connection with ATD Central Florida. We invite you to be part of this event. And now, Barry, I welcome you again, and I'm happy to listen what you brought for us tonight. Thank you so much to everyone.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I am going to try and share my screen here. So let's see if we can make that work.
And I'm going
to see that?
Yes.
You guys can see all that? Okay, great. Before we get started, I want to point something out. I tend to point it out in every session that I do because I started doing it almost a year ago now, I guess, is the notes down at the bottom, the closed captioning that's there. That's coming directly out of PowerPoint. So you're looking at a PowerPoint presentation, and I've turned on the closed captioning. I think that's what it's called. I can look real quick and see what it's called, but it's the closed captioning. And when you turn it on, it uses your microphone to come up with the words that are down there at the bottom. So if you see weird things show up there, it's because that's not pre-recorded. It's trying to pick it up and put it up there as it goes. What's really cool about that is, as I've presented in conferences, I've had situations where I'm literally the only one at the conference that's using this feature, and the people in the back very much appreciate it. And I've had people comment on it. So rather than stop doing it, I've started using it all the time. So it's there, and I just want to let you know what that is. And I will go ahead and answer that question. It's up here. It's under slideshow, subtitles, not closed captioning. It's called always use subtitles. And once you check this box, it's always there. So you don't have to worry about every presentation, is it turned on or turned off. So it's a really nice feature to have. So the other thing that I want to talk about before we get going, well, I guess before we do that, I'll go ahead and I'll reiterate some of the things that Maria said about myself. And some of you have been in other sessions where I presented, so you've seen this before, but I just want to let everybody know who I am. I am a learning consultant specialist at FIS. We are a very large financial services company. We're a technology company. So if you've ever gone to the bank and you've had a teller or a lending officer pop into a system, put you in as a customer or look up information about your data, that's our system, possibly, depending on the banks. Also, if you've ever swiped a credit card and you've used Amazon or you used PayPal or ordered something through Uber Eats or something like that, if you've used any kind of a payment network, it's very possible that you've used a payment network from FIS. I am a past board member from the Central Florida ATD, as Maria said. I've been around for a lot longer than 5 years, Maria. I've been around for probably 12 to 15 years. And it was like 2013, I think, is when I was on the board. And I was on the board with Rosa and that whole crowd that was part of that board at that time. I've also been a speaker at various events, including the Learning Guild, Training Magazine, and recently I was at TICE in Raleigh. So I've done various speaker events, and that professional side of me is okay. But the other side is the piece that I like to show off because that's the fun side. I've been a haunted house videographer, and that is not the paranormal type. That's the Halloween event type. For those of you, I guess most everybody on the call is here in Orlando. The house that I worked with is over in Altamont Springs called a Petrified Forest. So they're at the corner of 436 and 1792. I've been a local concert promoter. That haunted house had a stage, and I used to book bands in there for about 3 years. So that's where I did my concert promoting. I was an associate producer for a Motley Crue tribute band here in town. And I was a concert photographer at the same time. So as I was promoting those bands, I was also doing photography for them. And I have shot very large events, large music festivals, as well as, arena shows and things like that. The largest show that, or the largest artist that I have shot officially is Judas Priest. So I can put that up on the board and say I did that. I was a music video producer. I'm also a hobby board gamer. I'm a fantasy and sci-fi fan, and I like traveling and adventures. So if anybody ever wants to talk about any of that stuff, I will talk all day. So that's who I am. So what I wanted to get to was the fact that we are co-creating here. And I appreciate the fact that all of you have shown up to be a part of this. I don't know if you realize that we are going to co-create as we go here. This is an idea that I've had for quite a while. I've been to a lot of industry conferences, and one of the things that I've seen a lot of in the industry is the teachers that are coming into the field. And I've seen a lot of ID boot camps and things like that. I've even hosted several ID boot camps for the chapter. And I think that field is kind of full. Where there's not a lot of effort being put into it is what happens afterwards. How do we think differently? And what I'm seeing is you either have to attend webinars or you have to go to these conferences to be able to hear these stories and hear the solutions that are starting to come up and the questions that are being asked, because there's a lot of questions that we don't know the answers to, and we're going to get to that. So I put this together figuring we need a way to start this discussion. And the reason I'm asking for the recordings is because I think I'm going to eventually put together a product that I'm going to put out in the market for instructional designers that have been around in the field a little bit. They're not brand new. They're, 3 to 5 years. They're ready to start thinking about expanding their career and thinking as a learning consultant for their businesses that they're a part of, and becoming that partner that the business needs them to be. So that's how this was born. So I implore you to open your mics, be a part of the conversations, and provide feedback. If there's things that you think would make this event or series of events better, I would like to know. If there's tools that you think I could provide to you guys that would be more valuable, that would be great too, as well as even a project or two that we could work on in between times, between sessions. Any of that kind of stuff would be really valuable to have so that I could get a feel from people that are out in the field. So with that being said, I'm going to ask you guys a question. Do you guys fit that demographic, the 3 years and up, or are you guys, any of you newer, and you just kind of wanted to check this out and see what was up? Anybody?
I'd say I'm a bit newer to the ID world.
Okay, when you say newer, how newer is newer?
I graduated with my master's in 2021, and I've been in my current role as an instructional designer for just over a year.
Okay, cool. Anybody else?
I want to say I've been an instructional designer since 2016, around there.
Okay, so you got a few years on you.
Yeah.
All right. Karen, Wayetta?
So I've been in learning and development for 15 years, but I have now transitioned into a role where I have to be creating a lot more of the training content. So that's what attracted me to this program, is that I'm sort of switching from the consulting side to more of the experience training experience side.
Okay.
And I'm similar to Karen and Scott, where I've been in the industry for, or I'm sorry, in the field rather, for many years also.
Okay.
But I am actually going to be leading teams that are responsible for this more now as well. So I wanted a little bit more formal education or understanding around it, and some tools also that I can employ with the
Okay.
team. So even if I'm not the one doing it, at least I can help guide and direct and have conversations around it.
That's great. I think we have a good, stratification across the industry. So that's of length of time. So that's good. So we're going to have some folks that have new perspective and folks that have been in for a while. And Karen, I want to address what you said. I want to make sure you're aware, this is not going to be like how to build stuff. This isn't a let's build things and let's use different tools and how do those things work? Because my expectation is that you've already got that. This is about being that consultant. So I hope that this is going to meet the need that you're trying to hit.
I think so, because I think
Okay.
at this point I'm kind of looking at best questions, best approach. It's almost
Okay.
a little bit of change management, sort of
Good.
a higher level than the technical skills to build.
Yeah, that stuff is all over the place. So you can get that everywhere.
Yeah.
I wanted, that's why I tried to stay away from that.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and get moving. And I do not want this to be a lecture. So the goal is for this to be a conversation, because that's exactly what it needs to be, is a conversation. So like I said, I've been to a lot of conferences, and more recently I've been noticing there's been a lot of discussions, a lot of questions that are coming up, and the industry is starting to acknowledge we got some things wrong. We've kind of had a problem with e-learning. E-learning has kind of been, I would say, destroyed to the point where people don't enjoy it anymore, and they're looking for something new. I don't know that everybody's going to agree with that opinion, but I know that that's what I've seen in my view. I know that we're starting to say that we've got gamification a little bit wrong. And there's a lot of things that are now happening in the world with AI and some of the new and the metaverse and all that stuff that we just straight up don't know the answers to. COVID came along, changed a lot of things. So we don't know the answers to these things, but the only way that we're going to solve these problems is as an industry together, working together. People have to ask the questions, people have to put out ideas, that sort of thing. And that's kind of what this first part and many of the things that we're talking about here are about. So with that, let's go ahead and change the slide here. There we go. There's a lot of changes that are impacting businesses today. The challenge is things like the remote and hybrid working environments, the great resignation or the great reshuffling. Thankfully, I think that one might be starting to end up in the rearview mirror, and we're starting to see a thing called the great regret, which is people that change jobs and then realize that where they went to wasn't any better than what they had. So there's that piece. There's advances in AI. ChatGPT is just ridiculous. It came onto the scene in like December of last year, and we're only in July. And it's already, I think it hit 100 million users in 30 days. I think it took Netflix something like 5 years to do that. So, I mean, this is a thing that has eclipsed the term metaverse from everything I've seen. I don't see anybody talking about the metaverse very much anymore. Everybody's now talking about AI, and it's only been like 6 months, 7 months.
Is the metaverse dead though? Like, didn't they kill the metaverse?
Well, when they talk about metaverse, they're talking about like VR and AR,
Okay.
virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, all that stuff. That stuff still exists.
Gotcha.
And I think, is it Google? Somebody just put out a new Apple just put out a new glasses product that they're trying to do. And I think somebody's got a new VR headset that's supposed to be really cool. And I know that some of the other organizations have been still doing presentations on that stuff, but you don't hear the term metaverse anymore. I mean, it like got wiped off the face of the earth in like 6 months. It's crazy. A matter of, within the last 6 months, we had a huge downsizing in the tech sector. And all those people were out of work. And now all those people are filling, they're filling the holes trying to find jobs. And I know several people that it took them 6 months or more to actually find a job in the training field or in the tech sector or wherever. So, the economy's been having some issues there. There's been an influx of new people from L&D, from the K through 12 space. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's a lot. And everybody is telling them, go be an ID. And so that's where that whole entry level ID stuff is coming from. And when I go to the conferences, I mean, I'm seeing it more and more and more, that lots of people that have been in the industry, for a very short period of time have come from the K through 12 space. And I'm seeing a lot of managers that land on both sides of it, where they're like, I'm not going to hire anybody from the K through 12 space because they bring their own set of issues with them. Or the other side where they're like, I specifically want K through 12 because I can mold them to be what I need. So how do we get those people the support that they need in our field? And how do we help them find roles? Many of them are just like, I got to throw together a portfolio and I'm just going to apply to everything, and you start seeing 200 people apply for positions. Well, how do we handle that? You're starting to see no degree required roles and ongoing education as a thing that's out there. And when I say no degree required, I'm not talking about just the learning space. I'm talking about in a company. They're seeing that they can do the training that people need to get them the job that they need, so that they can bring in the people that can do the soft skills, which is down there at the bottom, the soft skills and some of the talent and stuff that they're looking for. They can train them how to do the jobs, so they don't need that degree. And how does that impact ongoing education at universities, and how do we keep these people employed and over time and things like that? How do we give them the off ramps and the on ramps into different roles? The future of work is a term that we have heard over and over and over again, and it always seems like it's in the future. However, more recently, it really feels like it's either here or it's very, very close.
Mhm.
So what does that mean? And we talked about the talent and the skills and the reskilling that's happening. L&D has become a retention advisor. This is a new thing that's been happening in our space, where for some reason, because this is that seat at the table that L&D has always been asking for, because of the pandemic, we now seem to have that seat, and we're being asked to do this talent and skills and reskilling. And how do we deal with retention and making sure that the turnover in the company doesn't happen and people have the mobility within the company? So when I say that there's a lot of questions being asked, this is an overwhelming amount of questions, in my opinion, to be asking all at one time. And like I've said, we don't have the answers to these things yet. And some of these things are new to us as learning professionals. So it's a little scary, and it's, it takes a little bit, and it takes those discussions. With all that said, do you guys see these things happening in your space?
Not all at the same time.
No? You're lucky.
No, I definitely see a lot of this happening. In fact, today we just had our town hall and they spoke about, the work environment, the fact that we're hearing a lot of organizations saying that they're forcing people to go back in the office. My organization is remote first now. Allstate has decided that's what they want to do, but they also see the need for people to connect in person. So they're trying to figure out, do they have huddle spaces, meeting spaces where people come together. In fact, they hired someone whose title basically is like work futurist. And that is her job, is to think about the future of work at Allstate and design our org to support that. So all of these things we are definitely seeing in specifically Allstate, and also I think in the insurance industry as well.
Is that person that you described, are they part of the HR field?
They are
Okay.
part of the HR department. Yep.
Is your learning and development, I know you were in one of the other sessions and I don't remember your answer if I asked you. Are you part of the HR field or are you part of a different team?
I am actually under the customer experience team, specifically customer experience culture. And so there are a lot of learning interventions that are a part of transforming the culture. And so I work very closely with our global learning and development teams.
Okay, and your global team trains internally and you train externally?
No, I train internally as well.
Okay, because you said customer experience, so I thought maybe you were working with customers.
Mm-mm. No,
Okay,
we just design the customer experience, how they interact with our app, how they interact with our contact center reps, that sort of thing.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. What about anybody else? Are you guys seeing this stuff as well?
Most definitely. I'm working for Valencia College, so in the education setting, as a community college, it's a little bit difficult to compete with other businesses in the market that have higher salary ranges for their employees and things of that nature. So Great Resignation definitely impacted us, especially during the COVID time, with all the changes that were happening, compounding with a new presidency. Our president retired at the time, so since then there have been a lot of organizational shifts, which puts us in a position where we need to put a bigger focus on that reskilling piece in order to retain employees. A lot of employees moving around, being asked for to complete like different roles, responsibilities, etc. So
What are you seeing around the two that are there on the middle section there, the influx of people from L&D to from K through 12 or the no degree required? Are you seeing teachers leave to go into the training field?
we actually just hired a teacher onto our team. One of the professors, she's still doing part-time work as a professor, but we hired her as an assistant director in the employee development team.
Okay, but not as
That's-
an ID though, but as a director.
No, I'm the ID, though she has some ID experience as well. So I
Okay,
think that was part of the attraction to it. But I've seen a lot of posts on social media, just a bunch of different ID LMS pages that I'm part of. A lot of posts of faculty that are considering getting into ID work, trying to leave the education system for a number of reasons.
mm-hmm.
It's a tough job.
So what about the other thing, the no degree required? How is Valencia dealing with that? Are they?
The no degree required. Um, that's an ongoing conversation, and it's something that Valencia always considers as far as whenever a position is created, they try to focus on what is absolutely necessary for that position as opposed to what would be desirable.
I think the focus of my question
Sure.
is, are you seeing a drop in students because they're able to go out into the field and get jobs without having to come to school?
No, thankfully we're actually starting to see an influx of students.
Oh, okay.
After COVID, there was a bit of a dip. Um, a lot of the students we tailor to lower income communities, marginalized communities. So a lot of our students had to focus elsewhere. But we're seeing a larger influx of students. A lot of new programs have been formed on like skills training, like carpentry, construction, things of that nature. So it's the
So
schools
it's
just,
closer to a trade school mentality.
there's a lot of that going on now, yes.
So no degree required may actually not mean no degree required. It may mean that you got to go get a certification in something or some entry level piece, but you don't have to go all the way to like a bachelor's or something.
Right.
It might mean 2 years.
Mhm.
So how that gets defined is something that's worth talking about.
Yeah.
So does anybody else want to comment on any of this before we move on?
Yeah,
I was,
oh, sorry, Wyatta. I was part of the Great Resignation. I left UCF to go into corporate. I worked at UCF in the distance learning department for 9 years, first as tech support and then as an L&D consultant. And in my current role, I would say my focus, I was brought on as the first ID on my team. We have an entire learning and development team for the bulk of our employees. I was hired specifically under our leadership sleeve to train management from frontline up to the C-suite. And the only things I focus are on the last two, teaching management how to work with their talent, the skills and the reskills, and then how does my learning and the things that I create reflect retention at the company.
Okay. That's very interesting. That's kind of where I have kind of ended up in my career. I've moved into those pieces as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Wayetta, did you want to add something?
Just really quickly, my role encompasses some org development responsibilities as well. And so not just in the learning space, but thinking about your top box and on the left side and your bottom box on the left. I mean, I think that's the world that I live in through technology and through information. You know, we are a much bigger world than we ever were before. So despite some of what I consider propaganda in the United States right now around remote work and hybrid work, you know, I in particular work for a global organization, but in general, even if your organization isn't global, you know, the world again is more future focused and moving so quickly that L&D is, you know, right behind it, at least in my world. So I was thinking that remote work and hybrid work is not going away. And that's no matter who tweets whatever they tweet out there in the world, it's not going anywhere. And that's part of future work, which is directly connected to technology, but also from the OD space that also connects so closely, or everything we do in learning connects so closely to retention. So in my world also, HR and OD sit in the, L&D and OD sit in the HR space. But this is all like, these are all daily conversations and things that we have to navigate. And then that is on top of upskilling with technological capabilities and everything else. So that's at least what my daily conversations, you know, feed into.
Would you say that your organization has the answers?
No.
No.
I work for a company that's 100 years old, and yeah, we're a 100-year-old company, and only in the last 4 years do we have a formal learning department. So that tells you where we're at in the curve.
We're kind of in that same boat. We've been around for a while, but we've only had like internal employee training for like the last 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
We kind of just threw people in and said, go learn it the way everybody else did. They all figured it out. Mentorship, let's go. Apprenticeship, so to speak, you know, and we're now being formalized, and that's where I land in that. So Monique, hi. We didn't see you when you came in, so hello. Scott or Monique, do you want to add anything here? Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and continue on.
Barry, I'm gonna give Scott or Monique the first space, but I would like to share with you what is on the comments a little bit.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's go with Monique or Scott first, and then I share what is in the comments.
Yeah, I can go. Hi everyone. Hi Barry, nice to see you. I put my comment in the chat, but I work for a sororities headquarters, and so I don't necessarily work to build any kind of content for employees. My learners are the collegiate officers and members, and the alumni officers and volunteers. So a lot of I don't see most of what's on the screen, but there is a big emphasis on leadership development, which falls into upskilling. And a lot of my work also does revolve around making sure the members have a really good experience so that we can retain them, because our salaries are dependent upon membership dues.
Okay.
Scott, would you like to add anything?
You all have covered most of it, but I definitely left the position on the Great Resignation, had a little bit of regret, and It's funny, Jackie just left UCF. I just joined UCF and
Maybe
kind
you
of
took her old job.
I did not take her spot.
I
though.
kid. I was seriously doubting that happened. That would
I was
be,
gonna say, Scott,
that
where are
would be
you
amazing
working?
if that actually happened.
Yeah. What department, Scott?
I work with facilities and business operations. So I'm working with a lot of blue collar guys that are not working hybrid and remote. They're on the job every day. So going back a little bit and working on the soft skills and a lot of face to face. We'll see how we can merge some tech and virtual stuff in there to assist the other shifts.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Okay, there are a few notes in here. When Eta was mentioned, technology has given people too much confidence to create content for learning. As Scott mentioned, hadn't heard the great regret, but definitely experienced that. I came from K-12 several years ago, definitely understand both sides. This Daniel mentioned there are enough transferable skills between the teaching and ID roles that facilitate that transition. And Monique, of course, mentioned my role is a bit different. I work for a sonor. Well, that was what she mentioned to us, so I won't repeat it.
Yeah, I would agree that the K through 12 skills are questionable when it comes over as transferable skills. That's part of the challenge, is that they're being told you could go do this, and they're struggling because they don't transfer as well, and there's other challenges, and that's for a whole nother program, but it is a thing that's a challenge. So this is our time to shine, right? How do we help each other as we solve some of these challenges that we've all been discussing, knowing that we don't know the answer and our organizations don't know the answer, but they're looking at us going, what's the answer? How do we deal with this? And, some of us are being thrown into situations we've never been in before. So that brings us to design thinking, and how are we going to solve this? And the only way to do that is to kind of work together, which is why I said, let's have this kind of an event where we start talking about some of this stuff. So basically with design thinking, we're going to try ideas, fix what doesn't work, make things better until we find a solution. And just for the fun of it, I leveraged AI and I asked it, what is design thinking? And this is what it gave me. And basically there's like a couple of steps in here. So it's understanding the needs and the wants of the customers, generating many potential solutions, and then iterating and refining on the solutions. And you guys can read the rest. I'm not going to read it to you, but was ChatGPT right? I guess is the question. Is that what design thinking is in your eyes? You can just give me a thumbs up or shake your head or something. Okay, I see one. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing everybody at one time. So, okay, I see another one. Yes, yes. Okay, well, that's good. So ChatGPT did a good job here. So that's good. By the way, this was the free ChatGPT. So ChatGPT 3. So as of 2021, that's what design thinking was. So unless it's changed between 21 and 23, this is what it is. Okay, cool. We all agree. So that's good. Okay, so the process of design thinking is we frame a question, we gather inspiration from ideas and things of what we know. We're going to generate ideas. We make ideas tangible using prototypes and trying things out. And then we test and evaluate the idea and share our results. This program is a function of that. I framed a question. I got some different ideas. I worked with some of the folks with the ATD, Maria being one of them. And this is the tangible idea. This is the prototype to see how it goes. And then when we're done, we're going to evaluate the idea and, share our results and figure out if this was a worthy endeavor and if everybody got something from it. So we're going through this process right now live, but I'm going to bring up some questions, some things here, and we'll talk about them. So this is the open mic session now. So what questions would you pose based on the existing challenges. What are, we talked a little bit about what you saw, but when we talk about the questions, what are the questions that you guys are finding to ask that you feel is actually important? And I'm gonna kind of start writing stuff down here as you guys speak, because I'm curious what other people's questions are. And I guess I could start, actually. I can start with this and say, hey, I went to a conference and I literally was talking to vendors, just trying to identify how they were dealing with two things. With how do they do problem solving, training for problem solving as a skill set, and collaboration and things like that. And how are they using AI? And to be fair, the answers I got were kind of garbage. I was not happy with the answers I was given, because many of them said, well, we have a bunch of videos in this curriculum on how to do problem solving. And I'm like, well, really? That you don't watch a bunch of videos and then know how to problem solve. You actually have to problem solve. And to collaborate, you actually have to collaborate. So how do we teach these things? So that's the problem I'm trying to solve, because I found that when I was talking to my various stakeholders, and in a tech company, I was expecting to hear things like Java and Kubernetes and database and JavaScript and, mainframe and all that stuff. But instead I heard the soft skills. And I was like, oh, that's different. They're hiring the people that have the hard skills, but these are people that don't know how to collaborate, and they don't know how to problem solve, and they don't have the critical thinking skills to ask the right questions. So if that's what they need, how do I bring that to the table? That's not videos. And I don't know the answer to that question. And then I was curious how AI was happening. So I'm gonna open the floor to you guys. What kind of questions are you asking or being asked that you're having to solve?
I think, Barry, one question I have is, with technology changing so rapidly and being a part of this future way of working, how do you identify future skills or upskilling opportunities when we can't even fathom? Like a year ago, I didn't think I'd be talking about AI to the extent that I'm talking about it. So how do you identify what's needed for the future in this just ever changing world?
It's a good question.
Yes.
Anybody else?
I have been on the programs that I manage and that I create, Barry. There is a particular essence that I normally try to bring up together for anybody, any target, and is how can I promote critical thinking? How can I invest on the training that I share, that people get ideas on how to improve their discernment, their critical thinking? Because I think it's key when you are getting information to be able to analyze, to evaluate, to ponder also with what you already have, with circumstances where you can apply them. So for me, it's key to really learn skills that help me to help others to increase their critical thinking and their analytical expertise.
Okay. Well, the vendors would have you think that you can just have them watch videos.
Videos, yes.
Anybody else have any questions that are kind of burning in their brain that they think really would serve well with something like some discussion?
So I kind of piggybacking off of Maria a little bit, but seems like the recurring issue is definitely soft skills across probably my last 3 roles. And if you can figure out how to teach that, like how to learn, how to relearn, how to deal with people, how to lead, presumably they can pick up some of those other skills and hopefully some of that future stuff, if we can teach them how to do the critical thinking. But even a recurring issue in my last 3 roles is customer service. That one is huge. And I'm now working with custodial staff, landscaping, and just how does customer service apply in your role? But it's pretty much universal across the board. And people dealing with people face to face after the pandemic is a challenge. So just those soft skills, I think, are going to keep me busy the rest of my career. So plenty of work.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I would also jump in on the soft skills train. That is exclusively what I build training in. And coming from my previous role where I built strictly hard skills learning, this is, something that I'm constantly being asked, like, how do we train for soft skills? But and they will toss at me like every other day, it seems like, can you just build a video about it and just be done with it? But what I have pushed back on, and I'd like to toss to the group, is how do you measure, training effectiveness and learning effectiveness in topics that are these soft skills? I would throw back to retention specifically, like how are these trainings affecting retention? That would be the biggest one that I see at my organization currently.
Do you have access to that data? Because that's probably an HR system data.
Yeah, so I do have access to that data. It's part of my sleeve. It's just mostly trying to figure out, what impact that the learning is having versus, is it the experience? Like, we're doing large hybrid work renovations, the buildings are being renovated, and, it's kind of hard to really pinpoint how much the learning and development has on these retention numbers. Learning effectiveness is also not something that I found that my company does. I've mentioned it to pretty much every L&D person I've met, and they're like, yeah, that's a really great thing. We just don't do it.
Right.
So.
Well, we will be coming to things about the data and how to get through that data. So there may be an answer in this later on for you. If not, we'll, hopefully the group has some ideas around it. So I think it's interesting that when you have.
Can I add one more thing, Barry?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Actually, I have a million questions that I would like to answer.
Throw a few out. That's okay.
Okay. Another question is back to your chart with the 9 boxes there. I think thinking about a learning, I'm going to speak for myself right now, I guess, a learning team, and a visual that I've used consistently since you gave this, Barry, is the stalactites in learning departments. Yeah. And so for me, I'm wondering how to develop a team with a breadth of knowledge different than, I 100% agreed with you, but I love the visual you gave that, someone just in instructional design or someone just in facilitation and learning departments doesn't hardly exist anymore. So how do we create experiences or learning to still be effective when you've got to be, your breadth of knowledge has to be, extensive from a horizontal perspective versus vertically. So which kind of goes into me like, the no degree roles kind of thing. And it doesn't apply exactly to me, but it does in a different way. The influx of new people into L&D. In my space, it's not necessarily from K-12, but it's just people that may have like one particular skill set in our business that move to L&D versus people that are really like L&D professionals. So kind of similar, like they have a particular skill, but just not the full breadth that we kind of need now.
How big is your team?
So my direct team is 5, but I'm in a region. So then the regional parts of that spreads out even further in learning. So my region is North America, Latin America, and Brazil. So within each of those BUs, there's many other people in learning.
Okay, is it like 5 per?
Brazil's probably maybe 10. North America is 3. Latin America is 1 per country, so 10 also.
So is it 10, 20? So like 30 people.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's kind of like people move from HR, sort of like the K-12 thing, or teachers, they move from HR into L&D. So I would love to explore that.
Okay. We have like 80 learning and development professionals just on the client-facing training team for banking solutions.
Mm.
That doesn't include the global learning team, which is like another, from an ID standpoint, it's like another 6 or 7 plus the facilitators. So we've got a huge, there's probably 100 plus L&D professionals at FIS.
Mm.
That's also not including all the people that are in the various teams that do training.
Yeah.
Even though they're not trainers.
Yeah.
Like the onboarding type stuff for new hires and things like that.
Yeah, sure. We're probably similar. We have maybe about 40 to 50 in the global team, and then there's other regions that have people as well. So
yeah. Were there any other questions you wanted to put on the table?
I'll pause.
Okay. So, oh, I had it right after. I had the slide afterwards so that we could just go right to it rather than having to zip back. I forgot I'd move that. So these are the questions I've been trying to ask. So is there a connection between all of these challenges? How can we get better at AI to solve some of these problems? Right now we're in a situation where people are afraid of AI. And it's because of, Skynet and all that stuff. And the fact that if you put your information out there, all of a sudden it ends up in the cloud and nobody can get it out, and it's a black box and stuff. But I think over the next 3 years, that problem will get solved. Microsoft is putting out Copilot. I know, for example, our company is working with Microsoft to put in a version that is our own. So it's inside of our network. So it's not going to be a problem and we can actually use it. So once we have that, how can we apply that technology to some of these problems to get better answers? If learners need to be able to skill up to be effective, what needs to change in our L&D structures? And Wayada, you mentioned that as well. How do we deal with that? Maybe it's a matter of leveraging the teams together as opposed to individually. How can we teach people to leverage the tools to create a better partnership? If people are going to have AI as a partner, how do we teach people to do that better? That's a whole new skill that we haven't even really gotten to. We're trying to figure it out for ourselves. Has there been much downside? There's been so much downsizing. Why? Why did that happen in the tech sector? What caused that? And as learning professionals, is there anything that we can do to make sure that doesn't happen again? What does the future of work actually mean? And why does it feel like it's moving faster all of a sudden? I don't know what's causing that. Why has there been an influx of teachers? We know why. I mean, that's an obvious thing when you look at what's going on between the political landscape and the way parents are dealing with teachers, and the way that, kids are now treating teachers and pay scales. I mean, there's a number of things that are there, but it becomes a question of what can we do? Is there anything we can do to help this? How does an organization create mentorship programs for people that are not college students? And why are businesses now looking to L&D to all of a sudden support them when it comes to talent retention, when they never used to do that before? What's changed in a business that's causing them to look at us for organizational development and not the HR department, which is where it traditionally landed? That's a whole skill set that learning professionals are not prepared for, but we're being asked to solve that. So these are the kind of things I'm thinking about. And I've actually had, there was a discussion at one of the conferences where they were saying that the first person to live to be 150 years old already exists. And if that's the case, we don't know who that person is. And if we're all going to be able to live to be 150, we can't retire at 75. or 78 or whatever, because now you're talking about an entire life again, not in the workforce. And, you know, our lives deteriorate physically by the time we're about 85, 90 years old. If we're going to live to be 150, that's not going to be the case. So that means that we're going to be viable in the workforce potentially till we're 100, 115, 120 years old.
I don't like the idea of that at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit scary, but
This is depressing all of a sudden.
but if you think about it, it makes your brain hurt, because now when you think about that college degree that you took when you were like 20, is that degree going to really survive you all the way to 100 to 120 years old? And how do we train people for jobs that don't exist? You know, there's jobs that are going to be created because of AI. And we talked about this, you know, somebody said something about it, is the skills that we don't even know yet, because the tech is moving so fast. You know, ID was not a thing when I was in college. There's no way that I could have taken an ID class to be in this profession when I was in college. So how do we deal with that? Because nobody's taking a 4-year degree when they're 80 years old for a new career. So how do we deal with that? That's that school, that's the organization, the businesses taking on that role, or a new role for universities, and how we deal with that. So with all that said, I guess it's now discussion time. You know, this is now into that design thinking stuff. Where would you look for inspiration for solutions to these challenges? You know, if everybody was mostly talking about soft skills, let's start there. Is there anybody that's doing soft skills training well?
I don't have an answer to that, but I did think of something as I was reading over your questions. You know, you have the question about why is L&D suddenly being asked to participate in like the talent retention field. I think, I know it kind of goes back to my earlier question about data, but at my company, the #1 recorded reason why a certain type of employee left over the past few years is because they don't, there is a lack of career growth. They feel stagnated, they feel stuck in their role, and they don't feel like there is a path for them to stay in the company any longer. And so that's kind of how L&D has been pulled in that way. A lot of the training that I've been focusing on is how do we build these paths? How do we encourage career pathing? How do we teach management how to, you know, learn to develop their people so that they're not just coming in and leaving. So that's kind of how L&D has been pulled in my organization.
One thing, can I add something to
Absolutely.
what Jackie said? As I was looking at the questions, I was thinking about like all of the things happening behind the scenes, right? So I think COVID exposed people to the fact that you're no longer tied to a company for 10 years, 15 years. You can go to the company down the street and make $40,000 more than you're making at your current role. And I wonder if, you know, crazy thought, if we start to think about career pathing in a different way, and rather than identify the high potential and put them on a track for 3 to 5 years to get to the director role, that we look at it as anyone sitting in a seat right now has a potential to be a leader, because the fact of the matter is no one has loyalty to your company anymore. And they're looking out for themselves, which is not a wrong thing, right? So if company ABC down the street is going to offer me more money and, you know, allow me to add value to their organization, I'm going to go. So there's that. And then there's also the fact that companies have downsized because of the economy. They're asking people to do more with less. So there is a lot more prevalence of burnout going on with people. So it's like, you know, we're offering soft skills. We're trying to get our employees to rally behind the business strategy at the moment and what we're trying to get. But then there are all these other distractions, right? Life burnout, stress, mental issues. And I don't think we have factored that into the learning environment so much. I know companies offer wellness and mental health counseling and you know, calls and things like that, but I don't think it's a part of how we now train people or transfer knowledge to people, knowing that there are different distractions going on. Sorry, I know that was a mouthful.
No, that's interesting though. Anybody else with thoughts on any of this? Like, where would you go to start looking for answers to these problems? Do you stay in the L&D space? Or do you go to the customer service world? Do you look at like the large big box stores and see how somebody like Best Buy deals with stuff, or how Disney does it, or how Universal does it, or, you know, or do you go to, you know, and in all fairness, the entertainment world's not doing so well either at the moment.
If I may say something.
Yeah.
I consider that it's important to know also as a corporate, the leaders of that corporation or that company must have a direction where, to which extent are they trying to help their people to grow. Some of them can be on the area of soft skills, but the soft skills that come naturally, you cannot learn it in one training. You have to start submitting a little bit of change in the cultural environment where they learn values and they connect with, people connect with the mission of the company and can grow in a holistic way just by looking the role model. Because it's good to talk about the good things, right? Everybody wants to talk about the good things, but who is acting in everyday behavior, showing that they are really embracing and living those good things, those good values. That's for me, that's the key on many cultural change implementation of training. Soft skills, you can teach in a training soft skill, many ways how to treat people better, how to be respectful, how to be listening, active listening, and show, you know, your affections, your how do you say, disagreement in a respectful way. Getting a better experience in the satisfaction of your customer. I'm not talking about the customer, the external customer. I'm talking about the internal customer, because there is where everything starts growing. The internal customer, how do they connect as a team? And sometimes it's something that, you cannot make 8 hours of training to really see the impact of your training on soft skills if you don't have constant evaluation of that change of behavior. Was that too much?
No, not at all. It's Maria, it's never too much. This is conversation driven. If we don't speak about stuff, you know, it's not going to come out. And I was just kind of going through some of the chat here. There's 2 folks, Jackie and Wayetta, have been on a mission to redefine career growth. And that's kind of one of these ideas, right? Have either of you guys seen businesses, organizations, or even industries that handle career growth differently and have been doing it successfully?
No. And that's kind of something that I wanted to bring up as you were asking, like, where do you go for inspiration? I mean, I will usually start with a Google search to see if I can find anything. I'm not really restrictive of like, am I sticking in the L&D space? Am I sticking to a specific business? But what I find, and maybe this is a misconception, and I'm not sure where to be looking, but I feel like, especially with internal training, how much are you really going to see different industries and different companies and what they're doing unless there is some sort of like case study written on it and it's publicized? Otherwise, I'm not really sure like what Microsoft is doing for conflict resolution specifically. And so it's kind of hard to look at specific industries if you don't have like a private view of what they're doing internally.
So I'm going to ask the question about how much do you network outside of the local chapter? Do you?
Yeah, minimally.
Okay, because that's the value. What you've just described is the value of attending the various conferences, because that's where the case studies are presented. That's where the people from Microsoft that are in the L&D space, or any of these, or Amazon, or any of these other kind of companies, they're there, and they're there in droves. And so you can go to their presentations, you can network them, you can directly ask these kind of questions. So for you specifically, I would say you live in Orlando. It's a blessing to be in Orlando because there's a lot of training conferences that come to Orlando. I would find ways to be a part of those, either through volunteering with the chapter, go to the Expo Plus Pass, which gets you in for free, or if you can actually go to the full event, go do that. But there's plenty of opportunities to go to these events if you've never been. Because you live in Orlando, you don't have to travel. So that's my answer there. But you're absolutely right that there's no other way outside of the industry trades. I mean, outside of, going online to like LinkedIn and finding these people and connecting directly with them and saying, hey, can we talk? How do you guys handle this? You could do that.
I think also, a lot of the big consulting firms have tons of papers on these kind of discussions as well, as far as McKinsey, Korn Ferry, Gallup. So I personally invest in every single, or I take as many of their experiences. Obviously, they're trying to sell you a $50,000 package to to use them, but it's still, when you use the word inspiration, can be very inspirational. And I think in regards to the growth, the growth conversation is interesting because it's like tackling multiple things. So in L&D, you can have this perspective, but then you're tackling some very traditional mindsets around career growth and progression as well in many HR communities. So I see that to be one of the biggest challenges. But again, that's why I'm on the mission, because everyone cannot be a director. If everyone is the director in an organization, then who else do you have in the business?
And that's okay.
And everyone shouldn't be a director, and everyone shouldn't want to be a director. And that doesn't mean you're stagnant. So somehow redefining that is just super, super important to me.
It is. And it's a difficult thing because you're dealing with culture. You might even be dealing with generational stuff.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to generalize on that and say that it's a generational thing. But I know that personally, I value like security in my job sometimes over income. I know people that like jump jobs all the time. And I'm like, I don't want to jump jobs all the time to make more money. I'm very comfortable where I am. And I make enough money that I'm good. But I don't want to have to go look for another job. So there may be a generational thing in that the older guard in the HR world and in the employee base feels that the ladder goes up and down, and they don't understand that you can go sideways and still grow your career.
Yeah. I think,
and then that's the mentorships and that's the apprenticeships and things like that fall into that.
I think the statistic is by 2030, we'll have, for the first time in history, 5 generations in the workforce. So exactly what you're talking about is the complexity of dealing with all of those, and especially in L&D.
Yeah. I mean, I have conversations with buddies of mine all the time that are not in L&D, and they're they're jumping jobs and stuff. And it's like, and they're like, why don't you do that? And I'm like, are you kidding? That just doesn't feel safe to me.
Mhm.
I'm not a young whippersnapper anymore. I can't just go do that and hope that I fall on my, that I land on my feet. Because if I don't, I got a big problem. So,
Well,
go ahead. Sorry, Scott.
No, I think the only thing that makes me nervous is when I look at some of these companies' ideas and models, especially we look at what some of these tech companies put forward the last couple of years, when anything they did, they couldn't lose money. And now all of a sudden they're letting all these people go when it seemed like they had the next great model. So I think one of the things I would want to see is a company that's been around a little while and has some consistency and gone through succession planning and has that stuff, as opposed to an up and comer, which is talking a really good game, but have they actually lived it and been through a tough time and experienced it, as opposed to just giving us their highlight reel. So I think that's one thing I'm always a little skeptical about.
Are there any companies that you can think of that are that?
I can think of Amazon. Well, I don't know what they're doing now, but I know a few years ago, they had it so that after 3 years, you had to move positions, and they set it up in a way where, if you're moving to HR, then you're going to move to operations. And so people were getting exposed to different parts of the business through that model. And then promotions were happening, based on that. And if you weren't getting the ratings to be promoted or moved through those paths, then you would be separated from Amazon. So they must have some sort of method for how they're managing their talent, because what do they have, like 80,000 employees or more, or something crazy like that?
Yeah.
So there may be some, I'm sure there is data and white papers on how they did that. If they're still doing that today, I don't know, because they laid off a bunch of people.
Well, they laid off a bunch of people, and they also have had union questions and, people working the really long hours in the warehouses. I don't know how that all plays in. I do know that they have programs that are the no degree required.
Mhm.
I think that they're training people to be coders and programmers, and they're
Google
moving from
too.
the warehouses into the, into their tech teams
Yeah.
internally. So I know that's happening. So I want to keep this moving because we are already past the 8 o'clock mark. So we
Yes,
should be into the next presentation. We're almost done here. What?
Barry, would you like to do like a 5 minutes break or something, if everybody agree?
I've only got like 1 or 2 slides left in this section.
Okay.
So let's do that, and then we'll do a hard break as we change topic.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
So how would you go about testing these solutions? As we're talking about things such as looking for companies that have the consistency and succession planning, and how to see different L&D things. We've talked a little bit about testing that one out and how to figure that one out. How to redefine career growth. And so how would you test these out to see if the idea works? Because I know for a fact that when one of the reasons I recently made a move from the global learning team back to the local level at the banking solutions is because if you think about this like a government environment, you have the federal government that runs the entire country, but each of the states have their own government. And it's very hard for the larger government to govern and drive the individual states because they each have their own leadership and things like that. So if you think about a business like that, where each of the divisions has their own driving force, that's kind of the local level. And then you have the larger level at the global, where they just do governance. I had a very hard time driving change at the global level. So I went back to the local level to be able to do that. So how would I go into the workforce at the local level and try and convince people to redefine career growth? Because I guess the reason I'm asking that question is because it has to be a prototype. You're not going to move a 70,000 people employee company and change the culture, but you can change a team. and you can test that and see if it worked. And then you can try and replicate it. And even when you replicate it, it won't be the same because each team operates a little differently, but it's all under the same mission and vision, like Maria stated earlier. So how would you test this? Oh, now the silence hit.
Good question.
Wayetta put in the chat piloting
I answered it.
projects. And
Piloting?
I think your approach, Barry, in terms of going local and
Mhm.
getting to that ground level, and then if you can get a prototype or a couple use case examples of it working, it definitely builds credibility to try and expand it elsewhere. Because people are going to believe when they see results and data, and as opposed to just good ideas.
Mhm. Which means that you now need various leaderships to buy in and all that, right? Yeah, it's not just me running around trying to do something. You need,
Yeah, definitely needs to be collaborative, and you need to be building your coalition from the planning and brainstorming phases all the way through. And we need to be very, very good at marketing as well, which is not always our forte.
hey, add that to the stalactite, right?
Mhm.
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 Right, that's the marketing and the storytelling and
Mhm.
the data and that kind of stuff. So any other thoughts on this before we move on? Because it sounds like we've kind of stalled out, and which is the problem with the questions, right? We don't know the answers. So trying to figure out how to find the answer. This is where the design thinking comes in, is how do you take this past the discussion to actually do some research and see what you can find out. And maybe that's what the homework is between sessions, between this session and the next session, is to try and do some research around these. Maybe you're not going to find the answers, but to figure out how we can do things like come up with different ideas around this stuff and looking for inspiration. And then how do we test them, right? We don't actually have to do the work. We just have to have a plan so that we can at least be thinking it through. And when the thing hits, we go, oh, now let's go. Let's try that thing. Here's the opportunity. Because if you don't have it in your back pocket, you're not going to know it when the opportunity shows up.
Yeah, Barry, can I add one
Yeah.
little point? I know we wanted to take a break. I think lately it's become super apparent to me
Mhm.
on this particular question here about testing possible solutions is culture relevant. So for instance, in my organization, one of our core values is collaboration, but we're also a Norwegian company. So whatever you think of as collaboration in the United States, it's like times 100 in European organizations. It is really true collaboration. So my point is, whenever I have an idea on a solution, my immediate first steps is really just starting to build the coalition like Scott talked about, because that is absolutely necessary in the organization. So I'm identifying my stakeholders, but also my possible champions outside of L&D. And that is, and then I'll always start with the low hanging fruit so it feels comfortable to the organization. But again, my approach on the testing is specific to our business. And I think that's what I found so apparent, because the Western part of me is just go in, you do it, we get it done. And culturally, that isn't always as effective. So for me, that's the first starting point, is understanding that.
I very much expect that the answers to these larger questions are going to be solved at the local level, and they're going to filter upwards to the industry, because the industry is made up of local groups and local people in the various companies that network all together. It's a big network of things. And from a system standpoint, it's easier to do it at the small level and take it to the big level than it is at the big level to bring it to the small, just like like I was talking about earlier. So yeah. All right. So with all of that, whoops. This is just the conversation just getting started, right? And I don't know about you guys, but I found this to be super interesting. I mean, even if we stopped right here, I would be like, that was an interesting hour. So I hope everybody found that. But let's go ahead and we'll take the break if you guys want for, 5 minutes or something, and we'll come back. And Maria, in all fairness, this may go a little bit longer than 9 o'clock. Is everybody okay if that happens? Or do we need to call it at 9 o'clock?
We prefer to keep it on the time frame, Barry, but I will let that decision also on the census of the participant also.
Okay, because we're at 8:20 now, 8:20, something like that. So do you guys want to come back at like 8:30 and we'll see what we can do in a half hour?
Let's
And
do
then we'll make a decision then?
5 minutes.
Yeah,
Well, let's be here then at 8:28.
okay.
I'll try.
All right, I'm gonna
Thank you.
pause my sharing or pause my camera, I guess. And I'm gonna step away for just a moment and I'll be back.
Perfect. Thank you. I am good. I'm good. Stay. Joyce. Event. On the participants, Let's rather leave it on the participant decisions. Respectful. Right.
All right, I think we're supposed to be coming back about now, right? 8:28.
Yes. Yes. Okay, yes, Barry.
All right, everybody back? Everybody good? All right.
See how.
So we are now shifting our gears. And by the way, Maria, I sent you a message that I think is you should pay attention to. So we're shifting gears and we're going to talk about modern learning design and learning myths. And I'm probably going to move through the first part of this a lot faster than I would have planned, but let's see where it goes and see what happens. So I read a book called Millennials, Goldfish, and Other Training Misconceptions by Clark Quinn. Has anybody seen this book? It's right here. There we go. And you'll notice that a lot of these presentations that I'm putting together, they're kind of based on books or things that I saw at a conference or whatnot, because I take in a lot of information from different resources and I'm trying to kind of connect dots and bring them together and see how they overlap. So I don't want it to be a complete presentation about the book. This isn't book club. It's how do the pieces work together? So as we start like talking about the different things and how did we get from here to there to there to this thing and that thing, and why was this one important versus that one being important? And that's kind of where I want the discussion to go. So I want to talk about some learning myths and misconceptions. And the spoiler alert here that I thought was really interesting about the book is like almost everything was a myth. There were this isn't like two truths and a lie. So it's everything is a myth. So we don't even need to question whether they are a myth. It's a question of why and what do we do about it. So the first one is that we've now evolved to have the attention span of a goldfish. We've all heard this, right? That we've all evolved to be 7 seconds. And the reasoning is because of working on mobile devices with smaller screens, we're prone to distractions. We jump from one thing to another based on what gets our attention. Therefore, technology is changing how we think. Given that I've already spoiler alerted this, where do you guys land on this? What do you think?
Barry, are we supposed to be seeing a different slide?
Yes, you sure are. Are you
Okay.
not?
No, I
Oh, darn
think
it.
take a break.
Sorry.
No
How
worries.
about that?
And I was so excited listening that I even didn't
Here,
apply.
let me back up. I'll back up for you. Whoops.
Is everyone seeing the take a break? Oh, there we
Yes,
go.
now
Yeah, there we go. Sorry. So we're doing the modern learning design and learning myths. And this is the book that I was looking at. And there was a spoiler alert on the screen saying that most are myths. And then now we're here. Okay, so now we're all back in the game. So what do you guys think? I mean, obviously it's a myth, but is there any truth to it? Do you think that we have evolved? And it's okay if you guys disagree, because I know there were some things in the book I read and I'm like, I'm not sure that I agree with that.
I'm fascinated to hear how they determine it as a myth. Just knowing in the age of information that we're living in, where we've never been in a time where information has been so close to our fingertips. And then even looking at, I know with TikTok is built to be something that's incredibly addicting. Short videos, attention grabbing, you kind of just get sucked in and then hours later you're like, what did I even look at?
Right.
It also kind of made me think a little bit about like the COVID experience and its effects on long-term thinking and brain fog and all of that. And I wonder, I don't know when this book was published, but I wonder, I think of like medical reasons that may have arisen from COVID that have affected, our attention span.
2018.
Okay, so right before.
Yeah. So what they said was that the original statement came from a Microsoft study of how long people stay on a web page, which was less than 7 seconds. So we choose to focus on for how long we're on something and how much attention we give it. So for example, if 7 seconds is the span of a goldfish and we've evolved into that, how many of you guys have binge watched a show recently? How long was that show?
Every weekend, I'm binge watching something.
Yeah, it's not 7 seconds, right?
Yeah.
And has anybody seen a movie recently? I don't care what movie, but have you seen a movie?
Yes.
Many of them are now 3 hours long. And I can promise you, if there was a Star Wars movie that came out that was 9 hours long, or a Harry Potter or a Marvel, superhero movie, we would all be there with our popcorn, sitting there for 9 hours watching that movie. So, or a video game. Have you guys played video games? Have you or seen a kid play a video game for like hours and just get lost? Right? Clearly, it's more than 7 seconds or even a 3-minute YouTube video, right? So to think that our brain has evolved to be 7 seconds, it's clearly a myth when you look at it that way. That it's how entertaining and how engaging is the thing that causes it. And by the way, evolution takes like thousands of years. And the internet is only, and mobile devices and things, the pandemic was only a couple of years ago. And mobile devices have only been a couple of decades, and internet is a couple of decades. And so there's no way that our brain has actually evolved to be the span of a goldfish. But our desire for entertainment has shifted. So that's at least the way I think about it. So the next one is, for those who have grown up in the digital age, they have unique skills with technology. Younger people are better than older people when it comes to technology because they grew up with it. What do you guys think?
Some of them do, and some of them only know how to get to the videos. So it's still very specific on the group.
Yeah, this is another one that made me go, I'm not sure that I buy in, because on YouTube, and I think I have a note on it here. Did I put it in here? No. Yeah, some of the oldest YouTubers are between the ages of 80 and 106. So to think that grownups can't handle it is a myth. It has to be a myth if they're out there doing it, because they're not. I don't think that these folks are doing it with the help of their 10-year-old. But I can tell you that I have a nephew who is around the age of 10, and he's had an iPad in his hand since he was probably a year old. And that kid can he's a whiz when it comes to that stuff. I mean, he can run circles around me. So I would agree that it's on both sides, like you were saying, Scott. So, I think that what they're saying here is that younger and older folks can leverage the technology to the same level, but there's differences in familiarity and capability, because I also think that there's things that have to do with technology that the younger generation can't figure out that the older generation can't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, so just because somebody is younger doesn't mean that they're technology focused, that if you're putting some content together that requires something like it's an app or a user interface or things like that, you should assess based on skill level rather than based on what generation they came out of.
I think it's more motivation, right? So like, somebody who is maybe in their 60s are used to the way things were. And so it's harder to get over, something new and shiny. So, but I agree with you. I don't think it's a skill issue. It's more ability to change or motivation to change.
Right. It's kind of like I personally prefer Facebook. I don't spend a lot of time on LinkedIn as much as I should. And I don't spend any time on Instagram and almost no time on TikTok unless it's something that somebody has shared into Facebook or into YouTube. I spend a lot of time on YouTube, actually, but the stuff I watch is very informational oriented as opposed to, entertainment. So, and I don't spend a lot of time watching people fall on their face or, make stupid jokes and whatnot. So I don't know where I'm going with that, but it's definitely an age thing, I think, for me.
Well, my 14-year-old niece told me that Facebook is for old people.
Yeah,
so
see, there you go. Right. But that's not a skill,
no.
it's a motivation.
Well, I taught my mom is 83 years old, and we taught her how to send messages for WhatsApp because all the family is in Venezuela and all around the world.
Mhm.
And every day she used that tool to send voice message, to text, and listen to all the messages that she received. And that's what keep her going every day during the morning. So it's really the interest of anyone, or the inspiration.
Yeah, and we see it in I see it at least in my family. I don't know about everybody else's family, but my family used to be big on thank you notes, and they used to be big on writing letters. And now we use email and text messages. And so I don't know that any of the generation like my age and younger in our family even know how to write a thank you note, let alone do it. And then the older generation gets upset because there are no thank you notes. But if they had asked for an email, or if they had asked for a text message or a Facebook post thanking them for something, they probably would have got it, or an Instagram video. They would have gotten everything they were looking for. So it lands in that same discussion, I think. Okay, so human learning is about change forever, is about to change forever because of digital delivery. Because the younger generation learns with and through technology, they therefore learn differently than past generations. I see heads nodding negatively. What do you guys, what's going on?
Well,
Has
you already
technology
gave
changed
us-
how people learn?
You gave us a cue already, so we know it's not true.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's a myth.
I
Let's
have
start
a
there.
6-year-old. He's not learning any differently than I learned when I was a kid.
Right. He's learning using different tools.
Yeah.
Right? That's not a myth, right? The means of how they learn is not a myth. They're online learning, but the way that but here's the statement again about the evolution requiring thousands of years, and then modern technology has only been around for like 20 years. So technology changes the what we learn and the tools that we use to learn, but it has not fundamentally changed how we actually learn. Our brains still work the same way they always have. So to learn something new, we still need to take action and receive that feedback. And this is what gets us to the retention and the transfer that we're shooting for. And Karen, is that what you're seeing with your son?
Yeah, absolutely. We still have to study for the spelling test, right? Repetition and practice. It's the same.
Yep. We only use 10% of our brain. We've all heard this, right? Most of our brain power is untapped. If we just tap into the other 90%, we can learn and do anything. No? No? Why not?
I think we learned this on The Simpsons, even like way back when they covered this.
Oh, they did?
Mhm.
What did they say? I don't remember. I mean, there's so many.
It was a whole shtick about like maximizing the brain power of like how much like Homer could use, and then they like tried to play it off that like he was a very intelligent person when he used 100% of his brain power. But that's not actually the case. Isn't it something about the realms of our brain that are like fired depending on our environment? There's something,
the strength of the right and the
right?
Yeah.
the brain, and also it also depends on your intelligences, because there are multiple intelligences, and not we don't use, or we don't have all of them developed. We can help them to be developed, but we don't come with the development of the 7 of them.
Well, the way that they presented it is that we use 10% of our brain on any specific task. So when you're doing one thing, you might be using 10%, but when you're doing a different thing, you're using a different 10%. So you are in fact using 100% of your brain, but you might only be using 10% at any one point in time. But it's not like there's extra brain power stored in there somewhere that you can tap into, that you can use later because it's just available. It doesn't work like that. And Jackie, I am curious. I'm not going to ask you how old you are, but
I'm
have you ever
29.
lived, what?
I'm 29.
You're 29. So you have never lived in a world that hasn't had The Simpsons.
Correct.
They've always been there
Correct.
because it's the longest running TV show ever.
It's a weird world.
Yeah. There's like a lot of Simpsons that I haven't watched, but I remember when The Simpsons was brand new, even before it was The Simpsons. So it's related to time and effort rather than actual brain availability is the point of this. So how many of you have heard it takes 10,000 hours to master a skill? If you want to learn anything, all you have to do is practice for 10,000 hours. What do you think?
Well, depends what you're learning.
Do the people that you work with at your companies, do they have 10,000 hours to master a skill? I didn't actually do the math. I don't know how many days is that? If you get 8 hours a day, anybody want to do quick math on that?
But the good and that depends. First of all, I mean, that's I guess a symbol that they are using on the unique amount of hours, but that will depend on who is the person that is learning and their capabilities, and also what are they learning.
Mm. By the way, it's about 3.5 years. So it takes about 3.5 years at 8 hours a day to master a skill, based on the statement that Malcolm Gladwell made several years back, probably close to like 20 years ago now, almost, I think. So what he was actually talking about was being an expert in an ultra competitive field. So for example, an athlete, a musician, a film director, if you're going to be, Taylor Swift, that's where that 10,000 hours comes in. But if you're going to be the guy that stands on the corner or plays in the local band that is able to play every weekend and, break even, you don't need 10,000 hours. So that's a good thing, right? You can be pretty good at something to be successful, which is good because that means that when we're training people at work, they don't need to be experts. They're not in an ultra competitive field. They need to be pretty good. And a whole lot of people in an organization that are pretty good become ultra competitive. So it takes about 20 hours of focused effort to be pretty good. So that's nice to know. That's way better than 3 years. So making mistakes is not required to learn. Making mistakes makes people feel bad, and that makes them not want to take our training. Have you heard that one? Certainly it's not true, right? Research has shown that making mistakes actually improves the learning, which requires us to provide rich feedback. So when we're creating e-learning, the feedback that's there by default, things like incorrect, try again, congratulations, correct, that's not going to work, right? People need to understand why it was a mistake. Have you guys ever played a game called The Sims? Yeah. Did you ever, I'm gonna assume that the first time you played it, you played to succeed, right? And that you wanted your people to be really happy. But did you ever, after that, try and make the person just depressed and pee on themselves in the corner? Yep. See, it's a thing. It's a thing. And now that you know how to do that, you know how not to do that, right? The failure was the lesson to learn how to play right. So if you give people scenarios, you can expect that they will take the path that drives to the worst answer just for fun. And in the process, they're learning what the negative path looks like. So that's a good thing. So actively engaging in that cognitive process is important, and then ramping up that challenge as you go. What about skills are more valuable than knowledge? We've been talking about that, right? If we teach them how to do something, that's sufficient enough. Anything else is fluff and a waste of time. No. Right. Problem solving skills are important. Being able to recite facts is not as important in the decision making as decision making, but The knowledge is what gives you the framework for making the good decisions, right? If you don't understand why it's a good decision, then you don't know how to make the good decision in the future. You're just following a rote pattern. So the thing that you want to pay attention to is getting them the knowledge that they need to make the decisions that are the critical skill things. So this kind of plays into the how do we train critical skills. So this is part of the answer to that, I think. You know, the knowledge provides you with the why, making sure that people understand why. Because once people understand why, then they can discern for themselves if they should make certain decisions or not. And actually that second to the last bullet, they're bringing only the relevant knowledge for developing the skills. In other words, don't add all the extra fluff because you bury the lead, right? So giving people what they need at the point of need is where I think the answer here is. So presentation of information equals acquisition. That's a hard one. Acquisition of knowledge. So they should know it because it was covered in the presentation. If you're not in L&D, you probably say this all the time, right? Hey, we had a meeting. I gave the presentation. They learned it.
Mhm.
Gave them the video too.
What? Yeah, it was in the video. Yep, that's
In
right.
the syllabus, check the syllabus.
Exactly. Audiences are smart, and if you present them with information, they can figure out how to apply it. Just remember it in the context, and they're good. Right? Wrong. That's the wrong statement. Right? Examples of how to use make this easier. So to learn something, you need to practice it in situations where you'll be using it. So you need to add the scenarios and focusing on what needs to be practiced. So this feeds back to the previous thing that we were just talking about, right? You got to create the practice situations, which is the knowledge. You give them the knowledge and you provide them the resource for information to help them do the task. And then you give them the feedback so that they can actually grow because of it. So the pieces kind of work together there. Passing a knowledge test equals a learning outcome. They were able to answer the questions on the test, therefore they should be able to do it on the job. We've all seen that one. Nope, exactly. Most learning programs are presented as content in a quiz, and the quiz questions are not even always directly related to the content in the course. And I've seen this happen all the time with like compliance training, but I've also seen it in like software training and things like that. And part of the problem is we are familiar with the process from school. And this is one of those places where the K through 12 folks coming over into ID, this is going to be a problem because they're used to presenting in that way. Now, granted, the school systems are changing, but the model of school is I'm going to teach you stuff, I'm going to give you a quiz, and that's on its syllabus. And it's been told to me by the school, and therefore everybody has to learn it, and I'm teaching to the test, right? So there's in the source becomes a PowerPoint file or a PDF. So to solve the problems, people need to use the information in context, and our brains are weird, or I'm sorry, our brains are weird, but they're wired to develop connections that get regularly used. So therefore you have to do things over and over and over again to build those brain synapses. So just watching the video one time isn't the thing that's going to make it stick. You know, I heard it called one time by a brain scientist at a conference. He called it a brain lollipop. That you just kind of go, well, you know, and you lick on that lollipop a whole bunch, and it causes you to remember the thing. And that's how songs work, right? We play a song in our head over and over and over again, and the more times you play it, you remember the lyrics. I remember lyrics from when I was a teenager because I listened to the music over and over and over again. So using mini scenarios rather than knowledge questions is a really good way to go. And I've actually, in my office, I've started to try and drive that a little bit. That instead of asking true, false, multiple choice, we're talking about mini scenarios. And then we're asking questions that represent the scenario that drive them to some of that critical thinking. So I'm hoping that that actually works, but I'm having a struggle with the instructors. There are my subject matter experts trying to come up with mini scenarios and questions. They struggle with that because they don't think that way. They think in the, you know, true, false, multiple choice way. So there's some ways to go there. Interaction and engagement are the same thing. In other words, this e-learning course is more interactive because we are more interesting because we gave people lots of things to click on. This is one of the things that we've broken with e-learning. I think that we broke it with the presentation and starting with PDFs and PowerPoints. And the other piece is that we've added all the clicky stuff because we think people need to click on stuff. You know, in a video game, you guys have played the video games, we were talking about that. What causes the cognitive engagement or intrinsic motivation when you're playing a game? Any thoughts on that? I mean, what games do you guys play? I'm assuming it's not like Pac-Man.
Right now it's Pokemon.
It's Pokemon? Is it
Zelda?
And Zelda? So what is the thing that keeps you going back? Why do you keep playing? It's what?
Because you can do stuff as a player. You can control the actions and interact with the environment and kind of do that scenario simulation thing. Like if I do this, what happens? And then you
And
kind of keep
feedback.
going back to it.
Yep. So it's if you can find ways to do that in your training, now you have kind of beaten this problem, right? It's not click to reveal more and roll over to see the answer. It's let me give you a scenario and I'm going to engage your brain in how to solve the problem, or watch the scenario unfold, or you turn around and you take, you know, you take a branching scenario approach and choose your own adventure, and you make the story happen yourself to see the outcome and then ask me questions about the outcome. So I just got a message. I want to just see what this is. Are you guys okay staying on an extra 15 to 20 minutes? Are you guys cool with that? Or are we going to need to cut it? Because it is in fact like 8:54.
I'm okay.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Good.
Cool. Thanks, guys. I'm glad everybody's having a good time. The 70-20-10 rule is a useful framework for structured learning. Only 10% of what people learn occurs in a course. Therefore, a good model is to focus on 70% of the training. A good model is to focus 70% of the training on experiential and 20 on coaching and mentoring. Now, this is weird, right? Because we said everything is a myth. So why would this one be a myth, you think?
Maybe because this is what we use, by the way, at my organization.
Okay.
But I think it comes down to the 70-20-10 puts it in such hard and fast boxes, whereas that might not be true for every individual in every role.
You are very close. It's like you threw a dart and were like just off the center. Yep. Yeah. So there's no direct evidence to validate that the numbers are actually accurate. But if you're struggling to get people in your organization to lean into a consultative learning style, because that's what that is, right? Because most of it is experiential and coaching and mentoring. You can use this tool, this model, as a solution to say, hey, there's this thing out here that says this, and you can guide people into that. But if you already do this, and this is like just normal run of the mill for you, you don't need the 70-20-10 because you're doing it instinctively anyway. And
Right.
you can adjust those numbers. So you were very close. Good guess.
I think it's used just to try to control your budget. That's my.
Oh, that's possible too. That is very possible. But I like this thing in the middle here. If the people want you to do more courses, you could ask the question of how much about the thing that you do did you learn through courses? And if the answer is not much, then the question should next question should be, well, then why am I making all these courses for people if the answer is experiential and doing the thing and putting people in situations and getting a coach or a mentor and things like that. So microlearning is the best approach for structuring course content. Content needs to be structured in short bits, like on YouTube, so people can learn more effectively and enjoy the experience of learning.
Not everybody learns in the same way.
That's right. Microlearning has become an umbrella term. That's the problem. It covers things like performance support, spaced learning, contextual learning. And when you think of these just-in-time videos, they are performance support, and they're not actually something that develops people over time, right? We talked about earlier, we were talking about learning problem solving and critical skills through videos. You need the other pieces. Otherwise, you're not actually learning anything. But breaking courses into smaller chunks is a good idea, but it misses the nuance of learning. It requires that repeated practice, which is why this myth is actually a sometimes up at the top there. Searchable indexes for short videos can work, and adding curriculum design around the videos is a way to address that. So microlearning is a maybe in this situation. Course evaluation should start at level 1. We're measuring the effectiveness of our training because we have level 1 surveys at the end of the session. I'm going to work on the assumption that everybody in here knows what a level 1 survey is. If you don't know, please say so and we can explain it. Okay. So in 2016, I don't know if you guys knew this, but Don Kirkpatrick acknowledged that he numbered the items incorrectly. So the list of level 1, 2, 3, and 4 is actually backwards. And that you're supposed to start at the top with level 4 and work on an organizational goal. And Maria, I believe it was you earlier on at the very beginning, you were talking about KPIs and business KPIs and understanding what those are. You guys know what KPIs are? Okay, so if you understand what the KPIs are, you can work backwards to identify the performance gaps and the behavior change down to the smile sheets, rather than starting at the smile sheet. So I think it's really interesting that, what is it, 2016, so 7 years ago, the guy that made the thing said he did it backwards, and we still follow it the way that it was originally made. So starting with the business need is how you become a performance consultant, right? If you're not focusing on the training and you're focusing on that KPI and you're going in trying to solve a problem and coming up with answers to solve the problem and then building solutions to do that, to address that, now you're a consultant and not a course creator, if that makes sense. That's the leap. This is where the leap is. And I can tell you that in my role, I have done that, and it has been a huge difference. And I believe we'll talk about that in another presentation. Social learning isn't valuable. You didn't learn that from someone on the L&D team, therefore it's not training.
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys had that happen? If people said, well, the training team didn't make it, therefore it's not training. No, I had people tell me this, that documentation, we have a documentation team that's in the product group, tell me that that's not training. And I'm like, well, what is it? Well, it's documentation. Yeah, but what's it for? It's to teach people how to use the software. Therefore, it's training. So yes, it is. It's just not training that we created. You know, if a SME makes something, it's coming from the SME, not us. It's still training material. So Teams, Yammer, Teams channels, those are all communities. You can get clarification from peers and experts. People misinterpret training material all the time. Speaking with others provides different ways of thinking about it. For real quick, the idea of flipping the classroom. You guys familiar with that term? No? Flipping the classroom means that you give the lecture outside of the classroom in video format, and you use the classroom for lab and asking questions and discussion and things like that. That's what this is kind of flipping the classroom and engaging with coaches and peers after the learning event and stuff like that, which is what I will eventually hope that you guys do, right? That you guys are now a little networked group of people. I hope that some of these will spark discussions with you guys and you'll connect with each other outside of this and you'll help each other. So that's social learning is absolutely valuable. An LMS is the key technology you need to support learning in your organization. Our training is successful because we store courses in our LMS and people are taking them. How many people focus their training on their LMS? Yeah? Okay. Well, the LMS allows you to host and track courses and the access to those courses, right? As well as completions. But it's a course management system. It's not a learning management system. So it's only a tool that allows you to provide training and learning material. It's not the full experience. Now, this is slowly changing, and you're dealing with some different like stacks of technology that help you drive this, but L&D supports performance and development as the focus, right? If we're going to change into a consulting world, that's what happens. We don't focus on courses. Therefore, the LMS is no longer the central piece because courses aren't the only thing that we're delivering. That's why this is a myth. It probably was true at one point in time. You got to use the right tool for the right job. So there's 4 takeaways from all of this that I got. Modern L&D professionals can't just copy what others are doing and hope it works, right? You have to follow, you have to look at the principles that these myths are made up of and follow those and abstract that into your own environment. Because sometimes a slower, thoughtful approach is more valuable and has a stronger chance of success than trying the big idea to be disruptive. Because sometimes it's just a buzzword in a new format. You know, the buzzword is an old thing in a new format. Buyer beware. An informed consumer will save time and money on it and unnecessary expenses. You know, if you understand what the myths are, you're not going to buy into the things that feed the myth. That's the whole exercise here, is understanding what's real and what's not, and be cautious of the new ideas and buzzwords. And then modern L&D needs to focus on performance and development, not the courses. So that's the end of that piece. So I am at like the halfway point of this presentation. We are at 9:04. And we said we could go an extra like 10 to 15 minutes. So I'm going to go as far as I can, and then we'll see where we are and we'll figure out what to do at that point. If I have to, maybe I'll record this piece later, and I'll make it available to everybody after the fact so you guys can still have it, or we can bring it back in another discussion and, you know, keep it going. So this is the modern learning design piece where we talk about a little piece of story time here. So I had to use SMEs to create and curate content several years ago, like right before the pandemic. I was asked to be on a project, and they asked me to create a curriculum for multiple job roles in like 90 days. And the only way that I could do it, because it was a product that I wasn't familiar with, was I needed to tap the SMEs and I needed them to create the content so that I didn't have to go through the process of script writing and reviews and audio narration and all that stuff. So basically what I did was I got on Teams calls with them and I recorded conversations with them. There's much more to that story, but that's the short of it, which was the first part of this. I was told by many people this wouldn't work. However, we had the pandemic happened, and it changed how we treated Microsoft Teams. It changed our expectations of production value and the level of quality of people's cameras and the audio, and the fact that cats would walk across or you'd hear kids in the background. All of that changed. And in that time period, after this was done, I attended a webinar that was on this idea of modern learning design. And in the process, from that, the person that presented, I watched a few videos on YouTube. And that drove me to buying a book, which, surprise, if you know me, that's the obvious answer of where I would have gone. And I know many of you don't know me that well, but I talk a lot about books, and many of the presentations here are about books, and you've seen me do that in some other situations. So surprise, surprise, I bought a book. Turned out this like validated everything I was doing. So it became a very important book in the way that I was looking at things. So we've seen some shifts in the field, and we've talked about most of these, right? There's shifts in the business and shifts for the learners. I'm going to blow through this. I'm not going to read it all to you, but this should all look very familiar from other discussions that we've all had together. So today, people can find tons of content, being videos, articles, podcasts, right? They search for people who are world-class experts. They can directly contact these experts and have discussions with them. They can take online courses. They can get micro certifications, and they can contact peers and managers for help. The question is, if you can do all those things in your regular world, why doesn't L&D act this way? Why do we think in course format that the only answer to a problem is another course? And why do we create courses? You know, so what this model did is it validated, like I said, a lot of what I was already doing, and it gave me a model that I could hold up and say, guys, you said this wouldn't work. Here's the model. Okay. In this model, you're designing for the whole, not the parts. And you're going beyond a one and done solution, and you're focusing on learner needs, and you're changing job behaviors. And the big thing was you're upgrading existing assets. We all work in large enough corporations or businesses that there's a lot of content that already exists, right? We don't need to make more content. That's not the goal here. So what do? How do we do that? Well, we build clusters of learning assets, and we surround that learner with those assets. And by doing that, we're not focusing on a single item. We're not focusing on a single course. We're focusing on like a mini curriculum. And then based on who that learner is and their moment of need, which we'll talk about here in just a moment, I think there's a thing in here about the 5 moments of need, but you're taking that, and based on their need, they can go after the asset that is valuable to them. They might need a job aid, they might need a course, depending on their need. And the learners get to choose. I don't dictate. And you're focusing that cluster on the end result, which is the job change, the change on the job behavior. And we are readily modifying assets that already exist to meet the need of what we have. That would be in the branding and making sure things are updated because things change in the world. And the document that the SME is going to give you is like 5 years old and something in it has changed. So you just want to make sure things are current. So the key that it focuses on is this learning cluster. And cluster is an acronym for changing on the job behavior, learner to learner differences, upgrading existing assets, surrounding learners with meaningful assets, and tracking the results of them. And the 3 that I was focusing on without even knowing about this model were the middle 3. Because that was my goal, was to create these assets and these clusters of knowledge and things like that. So I was already doing this, and that's why this like clicked with me. So the 5 moments of need was something that came out of the industry a while back. A gentleman named Bob Mosier and something Godfried, I can't think of his last name, identified this and have like made an entire business around it. But people need information when they're learning something new, when they're trying to come up with learning more about something, when they're trying to apply what they already know into an existing situation, when they're trying to solve or troubleshoot a problem, and when things change. And the value in knowing the moments of need is knowing that when I'm trying to troubleshoot something, I don't need a 30-minute course. I need a series of YouTube videos, or I need a job aid or a checklist or something like that. When things change, I just need a list of all the things that have changed. I don't need an entire course about the history of the process, right? When I need that is when I'm a new person and when I'm trying to dig deeper. But when I'm a new person, I don't have any background. So I need to have the bigger picture of what's going on. That 30-minute course, that hour-long course, or the 3-hour curriculum of stuff. That's when that's valuable. And then having an ecosystem on the back end that allows me to go after more. If I have time and I want to learn more, I can dig deeper. So thinking about these moments of need and thinking about these clusters is something that is valuable. Is all of this making sense to you guys? Is this new information? Yeah, it is? Okay, good. So the reality is that no single model is well matched to the many varied designs and development environments that learning professionals have to work in. Hence, ID professionals should be competent in applying and adopting a variety of models. This is from Gustafson and Branch in 2002. And I don't know where this was. This was in the book, and I pulled it out because I thought it was an interesting quote. But the reality is, we think about things in terms of ADDIE and in like Bloom's taxonomy and all the other different ones that I'm having a struggle pulling off the top of my head. There's one that's a new acronym that shoot, I can't think of what it is. Anyway, I know that there's stuff listed in here, but the point of the matter is that knowing all of those is important, and you can't just focus on one, right? Because if you're going to build a cluster of items, each one of them is going to have its own little thing that's like focused on ADDIE, and it's going to have its own little learning objectives, but the bigger cluster is going to have a learning objective of its own. So how do the learning models fit in? And there it is. This is what I was talking about. So you've got, in changing the on-the-job behavior, you're dealing with Kirkpatrick's level of evaluation and Bloom's taxonomy. When you're talking about learner-to-learner differences, now you're talking about design thinking, which is what we were doing at the beginning. When you're upgrading your assets, you're talking about Bloom's taxonomy. ADDIE and SAM. SAM is the thing I was trying to think of. Surround learners with meaningful assets. Those are your little e-learning pieces. Those are your micro videos, all of that stuff that you would build using the ADDIE process, SAM, agile development, and so forth. And then tracking everyone's results uses Kirkpatrick's level of evaluation and various different ROI or return on investment models. So by combining all of these things together, you get the thing that you're looking for. So what we're talking about is not a new model, right? It's a combination of models. So we're talking about shifting things from designing one asset and designing L&D controlled learning and being order takers and delivering training and so on down the line, to designing multiple assets, designing for planned and unplanned moments, and delivering performance on the job, and connecting learners to the resources, and applying learning theories to meet the needs where it's appropriate, that kind of stuff. When we create a training program, we're talking about attendance and mastery in a controlled environment, because it's a classroom or a virtual room or an e-learning program. We're talking about passing assessments, and usually there's not a follow-up. It's a one and done type of thing, and we're just trying to get people to spit out the information back to us in some kind of an assessment. What we're really talking about is changing people's perspective in the job and getting this content to be employee-led as opposed to us driving it. And that is what drives that motivation and increased performance, because if the business is involved in federating this content, they now have a stake in the process. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the business to have a stake in it. And it's not just L&D's job, because that's one of the problems that is the old culture that I know I've seen in my company is, well, we're not the training department. You're the training department. You should do it. Yeah, but I'm not the one that knows the stuff. I need you to help me because you know the stuff. So what improves the business? KPIs, right? What do employees do differently? That's the new behaviors on the job. So then the question is, what does L&D create? What do we actually create in all of this? And what are some of the skills that we need? Well, now we're talking about interviewing skills and writing solid learning objectives and needs analysis and problem solving and strategic thinking and the systems thinking, which is understanding all the parts and the pieces. So Wayetta, this kind of addresses your concern, right, about the stalactite model and what are the things that people need to be learning as to be successful in a model like this that's federated. So I had planned to do some activities here where we went through, here's an audience, here's a gap, here's the KPI, here's the desired behavior, right? That's the strategic objective. The strategic objective is we want to use a process to reduce project completion time by 5%. Excuse me. And those people are project leads, and the problem is they're not doing it fast enough. So knowing the model that I just described, how would you approach this problem? Would you solve it with a course, or what assets would you create? Or what questions would you ask? Would you go to the SMEs and start talking about? Because now you're not trying to create a course to solve a problem. You're working the other way down, right? You've got a problem, which is people are not getting stuff done fast enough. So you want to reduce project completion time by 5%. How does training help solve that problem? Because what you want them to be able to do is specified processes for every project that ensure that the teams are aligned and that management can provide a go or no-go decision. Unfortunately, we could sit here and we could talk about these, but I know that we're on time. So maybe the answer is to think on this one, and we can talk about it later if you'd like. Do you guys want me to just keep going? Or do you want to go through this? We are at 9:18.
Barry, I'm gonna be honest, I think I'm hitting a wall.
You're hitting a wall?
Yeah.
There's a lot. And I knew that we were going to try and cram a lot in, but we'll stop here then. And let me ask this question. Did you guys find this valuable?
Yes.
Would you have done it any differently?
I think if we had more time, that'd be great, but we can work with you and get you the email addresses for everybody here, Barry, so we can share out some of this stuff and give people a chance to do some prep or review going. And
actually, you don't even have to have the conversations with me. What I would much rather you guys do is take the time in between this session and next week and email each other and talk about this stuff and get your perspectives on it, talk through some of the problems. And then maybe at the beginning of next session, we talk about what you guys did and what you got out of it. Because that's really what the value is. The value isn't you telling me. The value is helping each other solve some problems. And maybe you make up your own problems, right, that are in your own office, in your own businesses.
And also I want to add that I think that is a great idea, but just in case all of them don't have the time to do that, to create that group collaboration, it could be good to maybe take a picture of this slide and also bring it over the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever you want, at the beginning of July 19, which is the second session, and that day is only 1 hour. So maybe you can, if the group consider the needs to do that discussion, you can, negotiate maybe 20 minutes more. And
right.
That's a way to do it.
Yeah, because we talked about the flipping the model, the classroom. That's kind of where I was hoping to go. But because this content was new content, we didn't have videos to share with you and go, hey, watch these videos, and then we'll talk about it in the session. So we have to make the content first. So that's kind of what we're doing. So
and I think
I'll send this out, and I'll send some, ideas of discussion, and then how you guys want to handle that.
Also,
back and let us know.
Also, Monique have a great idea, and she's posting there if we can have a Slack group, and I think that is a great idea, and I will take it. I will create that group for the cohort so that we all can communicate, and that will be also a way for you to share also more information as a facilitator. What do you think about that?
I'm totally fine with that. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of Slack. We know this. We've had that discussion multiple times. But if that's the answer for the problem, then that's the answer. I'll work with whatever's given. So.
And Barry, can I ask one more favor?
Absolutely.
Can we get your book list?
Yes.
In Slack or a document, because you have a lot of great recommendations.
I will do that. That is one of the things, and that's one of the things I would like you guys to be able to do, is tell me if there's job aids, cheat sheets, things, reference lists that would be valuable. Ask me for them, and I'll make them, because that's what I'm trying to do. Is I'm trying to build a support system to go with this.
Right. And when Anita wanted to say something, or you were just saying,
or you just giving a thumbs up.
Oh yeah,
I was thinking the same thing. Thanks, Karen, for asking. Barry, can you give us, since I won't be here next week, what is next week's discussion? I'm curious.
What is next week's discussion? Let me see here. I got to go to my email, unless you have it immediately available.
Let me see. Okay, I need to turn on this one. Just a second, if I can. Okay.
knowledge management and building a better learning ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you.
I can tell you it's coming from this book, which is blurry. That's very helpful, isn't it? The Modern Learning Ecosystem by our very own J.D. Dillon. And I say very own because he's here in Orlando and he's part of the chapter.
And it's going to be on knowledge management.
Yeah, and understanding how to build a knowledge management system. And talking
Oh,
through,
wow. I'm going to miss it.
but it'll be
But
recorded.
you will have the recording, Juanita.
It's not the same thing though.
No, true.
But that's okay. That's okay. All right.
So, Barry, do you have another slide? I would like to.
I've got more slides, but we can.
Okay, we are gonna.
Yeah,
stop.
we're at the end. I've got, I'm at slide 48 out of 63. So
Yeah. Okay. Well.
because the discussions, which I think are important,
Yes.
it was hard to judge how long this was going to take.
Well, it was great, and I honestly appreciate. I know that you do take passion on your material and your content, and I believe that also help us to understand better all the explanation and what are the points that we can connect to it. But we went through very crucial and important topics. We elaborate a little bit about the questions that we have in our days. We already on our actual or current position. You allow us also to identify what are the current situations that everybody is dealing with and what are your objectives or your goals to work with. We did a little bit of briefing about the testing solutions that maybe we can find. You also allow us to know and learn about the myth and the critical, I guess, question or learning opportunities that we have had during our experience, and letting also know what is false or what is wrong or what is right. You show us several mini scenarios that are very important. We went through micro learning. We went through.
That's a really long list.
The 5 moments of needs. Yes, and what I'm trying to do here is trying to summarize, because it's a lot when we see it.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we take that summary and put it in either in the Slack group, or we'll send it out an email with the presentation and such.
Yes, and then in 2 weeks, I won't be here either. But I really appreciate everybody to be, aware of the needs of maybe a little bit more time. And I really appreciate your understanding.
Yeah, thank you guys for sticking around. Wyatta, why don't you, if you've got some burning questions that are related to the knowledge management piece and the ecosystem and stuff, send those ahead of time. And I'd actually offer that to everybody. If there's anything that you want to talk about in that environment, about that stuff, if you've got some challenges you're facing or questions you've had, throw them at me. And that way I can get them into the presentation. So we can kind of,
Hey guys, you also are welcome to copy and download the chat, because there are some opinions, some suggestions in there. Maybe if you would like to do so, you are welcome to go to more and do the saving.
Yeah, when you save the recording, it's going to save the chat, right?
Also, yes,
yes, please don't lose the chat.
I think that is part of.
I think that's a second step you need to take, Maria.
I think that I should do it right now then, because let me see, save the chat.
Are we good to stop recording?
Yeah, we can stop recording.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, down at the bottom of the chat box, there's 3 dots and it says save chat.
Let me see.
So everybody should be able to save the chat.
That is in there. I already saved it and I can share it with you guys in Slack. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Everybody. Have a great rest.
Have a good
Bye,
night.
everyone.
Bye.
Have a good
You
evening.
guys. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.